Star Wars is one of the biggest American media franchises of all time, and basically since the inception of the series, around the release of Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars has relied heavily on the home video game market to supplement the films by expanding on the lore of Star Wars or adapting the films in general. Flash forward to when Disney acquired Lucasfilm in 2012, and quickly Disney went and penned a deal with EA to give them a mostly exclusive license to make Star Wars games, starting off with a reboot of Battlefront and eventually going on to other projects like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. EA put Respawn up to the task, who had worked on several flagship titles for EA such as Titanfall and its more successful spin-off Apex Legends, which is a lead competitor of Fortnite. Stig Assman was tasked with directing the game and is most well known for directing God of War 3 before heading over to direct the two games in this series. While the game is definitely a different style from the God of War games he previously worked on, he had a lot of experience in the third-person action game genre, which made him a natural fit for the game. The writing team wanted to have Jedi who survived Order 66 but wasn't trained to the level of your average Jedi Knight. This would set Cal, the character they introduced, apart from the more seasoned Jedi such as Obi-Wan, and allowed for a character that is more unsure about his place in the galaxy. The game was designed with a Metroidvania style in mind, so while the game is fairly linear, it also follows several paths for exploration, and has hidden mysteries and collectibles spewed throughout the map. From a combat perspective, the team wanted Cal to be more methodical and smooth, not necessarily living and dying by combos like certain games rely on, such as the aforementioned God of War 3, and looking to games like Dark Souls and the 3D Zelda games for inspiration. The game was finally revealed at E3 2018, back when E3 was still a thing, with the game's development finishing on October 2019. Initially, the game was released for PS4, Xbox One, and PC on November 15, 2019. The first additional port was debuted about a year later on Google's failed Stadia cloud gaming service in November 24, 2019, before the game was killed on the service when Google pulled out of the live gaming industry in January of 2023. A PS5 and Xbox Series X/S port was released in June of 2021, and it's worth noting that's the version I ended up playing because I just got the PS5 and I wanted to play the enhanced port. Why not? Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, as I've said, is an exploratory Metroidvania that allows the player to explore fairly linear levels which often have multiple paths. The game gives you objectives, and especially on your first playthrough, is pretty easy to find what place you need to head to next, especially if the player pays attention to the map and checks it every few minutes. The game has a pretty decent narrative, so you get the idea of what's going on throughout the game, and it's worth noting the gameplay is designed to do much of the talking, rather than bogging the gameplay down with several cutscenes, along with some NPCs which also occasionally add depth to the story. Cutscenes are rare and are often fight lead-ins against stage bosses. The game starts on Baraka, which is a fairly easy stage designed to tutorialize the gameplay of Jedi Fallen Order. Cal is in hiding, working in a junkyard on planet Bracca, 5 years after the Jedi Purge, which happened when he was a Padawan, when Imperials arrive attempting to find a Jedi they detected on the planet. Cal has to evade capture or death and goes on a train and several other set pieces to get away from the stormtroopers that are in the area after him. This is when he runs into the second sister, who was essentially a Jedi who defected to the dark side and was personally trained by Darth Vader. You must fight the second sister, but you're easily defeated without being able to do much damage against her. This is when he is saved by the ship the Mantis, which is piloted by Grease, and has another former Jedi on board, Kiri, who knew Cal's master during the Clone Wars, so Cal is recruited to help her cause. Kiri takes Cal to Bogano, which is a planet that has a tomb that Kiri hopes Cal can access. The game opens up a lot more here when compared to the starting area on Baraka. There's some creatures here for you to fight, and you meet your companion, BD-1. At this point, you're still locked out of advanced traversal mechanics, so it's fairly linear as you can't use force push, force pull, double jump, wall run, or any of those advanced features you get throughout the game. On top of that, BD-1's capabilities are still fairly weak, so you just kind of follow the path forward, and killing pretty much any enemy is worth a lot of XP at this point. And at the meditation circles, which act as hubs to save, reheal, or upgrade, you can start buying upgrades. Be warned though, if you use meditation circles, it will revive any enemies you've already fought, so you may have to refight some stuff. This can work to your advantage though, since you may want to grind out a little extra XP, especially if you're like me and never played a Dark Souls-like game before. After traveling through the area, we get this area to wall run, which becomes essential to traversing around the levels, and Cal gets a new lead, sending him to the next planet, Zeffo. Zeffo is the game's first skill test. The game's difficulty ramps up quite a bit here. Take your time finding upgrades and stuff in each area, and feel free to backtrack in the future. On Zeffo, Cal is searching for a tomb that supposedly has a holocron, which has a list of Force-sensitive children that they can train in order to create a new Jedi Order, potentially. Imperials have already arrived on Zeffo, so you'll finally meet some basic Imperial enemies. The Stormtroopers will primarily just shoot you, while Scout Troopers have a taser baton, and the area is littered with enemies. This is another good place to practice fighting these enemies and grinding up experience points for a little bit more solid upgrades. After traversing the line, eventually you find the route down to the tomb. The tomb gives me some vibes of like Breath of the Wild shrines, or just any Zelda dungeon really, with some nice little brain-teasing puzzles, along with some fun combat to kind of keep your brain in check. Soon in the tomb you'll learn Force Push, an ability which is super useful for puzzles and can actually be really helpful in combat, especially when fighting enemies with a focus meter, because sometimes it can take out a good amount of their focus meters, so just keep this in your arsenal handy. You also receive a hint telling you it's time to head to Kashyyyk, since the Zeffo people had contact with the Wookiees. From here, you head back through the caverns, only to make it back to the Mantis and see it's being attacked by an ATST. This will be your first time encountering this enemy type, but honestly, now that you have Force Push, they're a lot less scary than they look. Deflect its standard blast back at it, and if it shoots mines or rockets, use Force Push and it'll cause damage to the ATST. Keep your distance, and this stage-end mini-boss is pretty easy in all honesty. Next, you head to Kashyyyk, and it's a combat zone between the Imperial Army and Saw Gerrera, one of the few returning characters from the wider Star Wars canon, who's engaged in a battle with the Empire along with his band of rebels when Cal arrives. This mission doesn't yield much results for Cal's mission, but he ends up helping Saw to free a village of enslaved Wookiees from the Empire. The level starts as a neat set piece in which you hijack an AT-AT, and Cal starts blasting at other AT-ATs as you make your way to Saw and his team's location. BD-1 learns the overcharge ability pretty quickly into the level, and it'll open up a lot of new areas to you that you couldn't get to previously. On this planet, you also start encountering the occasional Purge Trooper, which is a step below an Imperial Inquisitor. These guys are often pretty strong, especially early in the game, and they'll kick your ass till you figure out their patterns. They aren't that bad. They give you a good piece of XP though, and they're kind of worth grinding out on. You'll also meet some security droids who take a lot of hits, but have a pretty easy pattern. You may recognize this type of droid as the same type of droid that annoying dude K2SO from Rogue One is. The area ends on a 3-wave boss fight against some troopers, flame troopers, and after those 2 waves you fight an ATST. The troopers aren't too hard, but definitely start with the flame troopers since they can stun you and their flames are powerful. Honestly, they can be a tad bit tricky and kind of annoying, especially in group settings when you're trying to deflect bullets. After that, you finish the area and head back to your ship and learn the Empire has been headed back to Zeffo, so the crew of the Mantis follow to investigate why the Empire would head back there. When you're back on Zeffo, you can use your new abilities to this time travel to the secondary tomb. Much like the first time on Zeffo, this tomb is definitely very much Zelda inspired, and this one is a significant skill upgrade from your last 2 planets. Before you make it to the tomb, we encounter the second sister again, who reveals herself to be the former Padawan of Kree. You fight her again, and while powerful, with your new skills and lots of dodges, she's pretty easy to defeat, to be honest. When you chip her down to about 50-60% health, a cutscene starts, which will see BD-1 activating a gate to separate Cal and the second sister, allowing Cal to escape from his pursuer and move on. After some navigation, you'll learn your next ability, Force Pull, which will be essential to finish the final puzzle of the area. Force Pull is a very useful move since you can pull enemies and get behind them easily, and for weaker enemies you can just pull them into your blade. You'll find another hologram. This one will tell you of an atrium. And you set back to the Mantis. On the way up, however, you run into Bagonk, a bounty hunter. He's fairly easy at first, but ends up shocking you in a scripted event and taking you right to your next area, which is a bounty hunter prison on Ordo Iris. I don't know how to fucking say that. This is a fairly short area. Basically, you're separated from BD1 and your lightsaber, so you gotta do some puzzles to figure your way out. Eventually, you're reunited with BD1 and your lightsaber, and you're put in a coliseum, forced to battle a couple monsters in Bagonk again. After defeating them, the Mantis shows up and saves you. From here, you receive a transmission that you need to talk to Tarful. After returning to Kashyyyk, you talk to Tarful, who you may recognize from Revenge of the Sith. He's one of those Wookiee general guys. He tells you to head to the origin tree, which may help you find more answers. You also learn swimming this time around, which becomes a useful skill. Underwater is full of collectibles, typically not stuff that's actually that important in making you stronger, but you earn a lot of new gear. Anyhow, you eventually work your way through Kashyyyk and find the origin tree, which you scale and meet a dragon-like companion. You have lots to scan and gain XP on here, so that's actually a pretty good way to just grind while doing nothing, and eventually you'll make it far enough that you find your double-bladed lightsaber. While I was writing this, I found out that apparently you could find this earlier in the game, but if you haven't gotten it yet, you'll get it here automatically. It's forced at this point. Seconds after this, you meet your first really challenging boss of the game, the Ninth Sister, who, in my opinion, is probably the hardest boss in the game, in part because you're not really super prepared for her. She just kind of pops up and she's there. We very briefly meet her at the start of the game and earlier in this level, but now it's time to fight her head on. The first thing I can say is fuck the double-bladed lightsaber for this fight. The single blade at this point in the game is so much better overall, but especially in this boss. Though you may assume the double blade may come in handy since you just got it, that was absolutely foolish to think that. Use the single blade. I also heard the saber throw is pretty good on this boss, but I got the upgrade soon after, so I can't actually attest to that because I never got to try it on the Ninth Sister myself. My best advice is practice parrying and keep close and aggressive. You'll do much more damage chipping away aggressively. I felt myself getting a lot better at the game overall. It's a skill test for sure to get you up to snuff for the second sister coming up. This will be tricky for people who haven't played a Souls-like game like I haven't, but it's satisfying once you finally beat her. I will say stick away from walls too much because you can get comboed, and there's a few moments like her charge attack that can kind of slide in a weird janky way and hit you like multiple times. So get good at parries, keep away from walls, and get good at dodges, okay? After fighting the Ninth Sister, you get another hologram where you learn you need to find the atrium that was hinted at earlier, and it's on Dathomir. Now if you're like me, you might have been tempted to explore Dathomir before you're supposed to. But you can only get so far before you get the double jump at the origin tree. So it's pretty hard early on. Like they definitely upped the skill level quite a bit, so it's kind of hard to do before you get quite a bit of upgrades. But it can yield some okay XP if you actually grind through it like I did, just to stupidly learn that you can't really do much here yet. Ultimately, you probably just want to not head here till it's story required. Anyways, this is probably the most important mission yet. When you arrive on Dathomir, you'll be confronted by tons of bow-wielding Darth Maul things that act as ranged enemies, and stick-wielding melee Darth Mauls, and tons of little critters that will try to kill you as well. Soon after, you meet the Night Sister, which I think is some shit from the Clone Wars or something, but she spawns these zombie ladies, and these are kind of cool. Alone they are no challenge, but if they gang up on you, they can be pretty deadly. Keep traveling, and eventually you run into this giant dragon bat creature. This guy's a straight-up Dark Souls boss, but fairly easy. Basically, you just roll into him and smack him. Just keep rolling into him and smacking him. There are some pretty easy-to-dodge special attacks, too. His face yields more damage. Once you get him down to like 20% left on his health bar, it jumps into this really cool set piece to finish him off. You're skydiving, crashing into cliffs, and grabbing onto him, losing him. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. This is also when you gain a new skill where you get these little claws that allow you to climb this slime shit on the walls. Anyways, you head to the tomb of Kashyyyk. We have another flashback mission that shows Cal attempting to survive Order 66. This vision leads him to confronting some personal demons and traumas, and ultimately, his lightsaber is destroyed. I didn't mention this, but there's a series of flashback missions throughout. Most of them are pretty short, like 20-second tutorials to teach you new moves, and kind of explain that Cal learns these back in his Jedi days before he shut himself off from the Force. But this is the most fleshed out one overall. being probably like a 15 or 20 minute section of the game. After this, Cal must head to Ilum, an old Jedi temple left abandoned in the wake of Order 66, to try to get a new Kyber crystal and create a new lightsaber after the destruction of his previous Kyber crystal. For the most part, this level has a bit of Zelda dungeon feel as you traverse this series of puzzles in search of your Kyber crystal. Once you do find a Kyber crystal, it shatters, and we learn more about BD-1's backstory. And as it turns out, he was a droid of the hologram Jedi guy that we see throughout the game who keeps giving us hints. His name escapes me somehow, and well, I could easily look it up, I'm not going to. Anyways, Cal fixes the broken saber and realizes that the weapon doesn't make him, he makes himself or something, which ironically gives him the OP saber power to separate his lightsaber into two blades for a pretty powerful attack. You can also get to pick your color at this point. For the PS5 versions, I had 3 options out the gate, but here you can pick from a number of colors. It has a few fun variations on top of the standard colors. I was thinking about picking cyan, the way the blue lightsaber looked in the original film print for Star Wars, but ultimately I went with purple because Cal seemed like a purple kind of guy. At this point, the Empire is hot on Cal's trail and will start to invade the temple. You have lots of enemies to test your new saber attack on, which is extremely fucking busted against basic enemies. And at this point, you probably have enough stim upgrades, which we'll talk about later, that you can basically just brute force your way out of here. You'll quickly learn the double-bladed slash is kinda busted. Eventually, you'll meet the area boss, which is just 2 ATSTs. These guys aren't so hard. Unlike before, the trick isn't really to deflect their bombs and stuff. This time it's just get close and saber slash those bastards till they go down. Once one of them goes down, you can kind of go back to the normal strategy, but deflection's kind of out of the question when you have to do 2 of them because it's just too much shit. Again, a lot of this game, in my opinion, was just getting up close and spamming the most powerful moves. That's the best way to win. After this, we can head to Dathomir. This time, we need to invade the tomb and get the key that can get us the holocron. This time, Dathomir has a lot less enemies, primarily being guarded by those zombie ladies who are pretty easy to dispatch, assuming you aren't cornered by a horde, especially since they don't have a focus meter. Travel through the level where you'll encounter Marin the Night Sister, who is skeptical of your motivations in trying to get this holocron. While questioning you, though, you'll encounter Malachus, a former Jedi Master, who will challenge you to a duel, since he wants the key as well and wants to see the Order stay dead or something. I don't really know. This guy's a dark Jedi by my understanding of the Jedi, but I looked around on Wikipedia and I couldn't figure it out, honestly. I thought Ahsoka was supposed to be a gray Jedi, but I guess she isn't. She's just a Force-sensitive person with white lightsabers, and, she dresses in gray. So I just thought she was a gray Jedi. I heard people throwing that lingo around, but I guess it's not true. Anyhow, you meet up with Malicious, which is a stupid fucking name, and you fight. He's definitely easier than the Ninth Sister, in part because your power-up sinks. He's a lot quicker and harder to parry, which is a problem, but if you keep laying into him and using the double blade slash, you can do some good damage. I also noticed Force Push can do some damage, but it's kind of hard since he has to be open, and you have to back him up against a wall, but you also have to be close enough that you can actually run in and get some hits before the focus recharges. I actually started using the double-sided lightsaber on him to get faster hits. I know, I shaded the double-bladed lightsaber on the Ninth Sister fight, but for whatever reason it just worked better on this boss. I'm not sure if it was the upgrade tree or what, because I have not used this stance much, and I was just experimenting and whipped out the double blade, and it helped me quite a bit on this guy. Perhaps each boss was designed with a stance in mind, and it's all just in the experimentation. I don't really know. With this guy, I would definitely say use the double-bladed, though. Once you kill him, you move forward and get the key thing, which finally allows you to go back to Bogano, which is the first area after the tutorial, which holds the holocron that would restart the Jedi Order. But before we take off, a new companion joins our crew as Marin the Night Sister also joins the team on a path for vengeance against the Sith for what they did to her sisters, because I guess they genocided them or something. I think the Sith killed all the Night Sisters around the same time they killed all the Jedis, is my understanding. But again, I've only seen the first 2 seasons of the Clone Wars before it goes off the rails, so I don't know. When you reach Bogano, you again run through to the tower in the back of the map. and you can finally reach the vault with the holocron. This time you'll touch the wall and basically have a force vision that shows you that if you restart the Order during the Empire, the new Jedi are destined to be hunted by the Inquisitors and Stormtroopers and likely be wiped out in a similar way to the Jedi in the Order 66 Purge. After this, Cal escapes the vision and gets to the holocron, but Trilla, the second sister, shows up and attacks Cal. She's pretty strong, but you only have to land a few hits before she manages to get the holocron. You take her lightsaber, and then you escape and fight a bunch of stormtroopers on the way out and such. Kiri knights Cal, making him an official Jedi Knight, or as close to one as possible, given that there are very few surviving members of the actual Jedi Order left, and since all the Jedis are scattered and unaware of each other's condition. Regardless, Kiri assumes her former Padawan is headed back to the Fortra Inquisitress, which is another fucking weird name. Which, I think this might have premiered here. I only knew about it from Obi-Wan on Disney+. I can't really remember if it was in Rebels. I did watch that show, though. Regardless, Cal and Kiri are able to enter the base because Mirren is able to hold a magical cloak around the Mantis, and the two enter from different paths. Cal is forced to fight tons of enemies, but at this point in the game, even with the large amount of enemies, you can pretty easily dispatch of them and make your way down the hall. This will basically also give you a chance to get one more upgrade in. Eventually, Cal floods the ship, and after this, you go through one last gauntlet room before making your way back to the stolen holocron. Right before you can take it back, though, Trilla will engage you in a boss fight. Trilla hits hard and her focus meter regenerates pretty fast, so for her you have to play fast and aggressive. Took me a few times, but I managed to get her in close quarters in the entrance area, so she wouldn't really be able to run around as much as in the full arena, which allowed me to hit her hard and fast. It was somewhat tight, but I gained victory. If you have the power where the stims recharge your force, you will save yourself a lot of headache, because the double-bladed slash is overpowered in all honesty. Hit her 3 times in a row with it, and it can take down her force meter and land a couple powerful attacks, and if you're quick and successful in doing this, you can even hit her with your lightsaber a few times too. You can also try abusing Force Push to cancel her OP red attacks, but it's a lot harder to actually get to her before her focus recharges. So in my opinion, I think the easiest way to get a lot of hits fast is to get her into that entrance area and just corner fuck her. She was probably the 3rd trickiest boss for me under Malik and the 9th sister. But after this, Vader shows up and kills her in a cutscene. Then you have to escape. Kiri is seemingly killed, but she survived apparently and defends you from Vader long enough for Cal to shatter a window, allowing the pair to escape. The crew of misfits find themselves off the Emperor's radar, discussing what to do with the reacquired holocron. But ultimately, Cal decides the safest thing for the Force-sensitive children is, rather than track them down and start a new Jedi Order, is to destroy the holocron, killing the chance of a revived Jedi Order for now, but the crew head off ready to do their part in freeing the galaxy. I want to dive a little deeper into the combat since I mentioned it briefly throughout the story. The combat, as I implied, is strongly inspired by Dark Souls. Enemies hit hard and can often chain decent hits on you. Dodging and parrying are required skills to practice as you go through the story. Dodge anytime an enemy glows red, which they do at least on the standard difficulty I played on, or hit them with a force push if you have some spare energy. If it's a standard attack, you can parry. On ranged enemies, you can hold block to randomly deflect blaster shots, or if you tap it, you can deflect blaster bolts right back at them. And for standard enemies, you can block basic attacks this way. If you hit it and get a perfect deflect, bullets will fly back and cause damage on range, or stun the enemy for melee, allowing for hits. The dodge gives you invincibility frames, so you want to do it and reposition to a more favorable position. For parrying, the blocks are less consistent if you're tapping, so it's best to get used to the timing and just go for it. It took me a while to get this down. My natural instinct was to tap, and once I got over this, I got a lot better at the game. Basic attacks and strong attacks can be upgraded to punish the enemies more than at the start of the game, and honestly, as you work your way up the upgrade tree, I recommend focusing on these upgrades. Health is good, but you can find stims on the overworlds that will allow for more health packs, which can help a lot. So while it might be tempting to try to get a base health bar increase, it's not actually super useful throughout the game. Speaking on that, the upgrade tree generally feels really solid, giving Cal very tangible upgrades to his skills. Lightsaber throw is added in eventually and can be a good way to grab a fast hit from a distance and give you a second to clear a gap and move in for a kill. Traversal gets upgraded throughout the story, though updates to Cal's force powers, which he gains in-universe by remembering some of his master's teachings, from before Order 66. You get little tutorials quick as a young Cal, and they're usually pretty neat. Previously inaccessible areas can also be accessed through updates to BD1. It's satisfying and gives you reasons to go back and explore planets that you haven't fully explored yet. There's also a percentage bar in the corner of the map that'll tell you how much of the planet you've explored. I played the PS5 enhanced port of the game, which is sold as a full PS5 port and loads from solid state drive instead of hard drive. I don't know anything about technology, but for a game released more than a year before the PS5, it ported super well. I think the game looks great, honestly. Places like the origin tree were super well rendered, and looking across the skyline, it looks beautifully rendered. Each planet is varied from each other quite a bit, and the textures and quality overall are great. Add to that the somewhat linear environments, and you can tell Respawn had the time and budget just to pack the levels full of cool imagery and stuff that both adds new stuff to Star Wars lore, but also makes you feel immersed in the larger Star Wars universe. You don't go to a ton of planets, granted, but I think that allowed Respawn to make a deep game experience and flesh out the planets you do visit very well. The music fits right in with the Star Wars feel, and it was composed by Gody Hobb and Stephen Barton. Hobb worked on Pandemic's Battlefront game and Knights of the Old Republic MMO, while Barton worked with Respawn on Titanfall and Apex Legends. It was a good team-up. It often felt pretty ambient, but when the music swells, it definitely follows the kind of thesis for Star Wars scores that was set by John Williams way back in 1977 when he worked on the original film. In terms of collectibles, I collected most of them, but never got everything. You can customize your saber hilt and color, but for most of the game you have pretty limited color options, and you can't really see the hilt much in game, so while it's cool to customize your blade and menu, it isn't really noticeable enough to make me bother trying to collect everything to make my blade look cooler. The other collectible cosmetics include Cal's outfit and ponchos, which are okay. I wish there were more options, like an armor or something, or Jedi robes or some shit, that would allow for a lot more customization options than what color poncho and jumpsuit to put Cal in. BD1 and the Mantis can also get some color swaps. I found myself getting a lot of these cosmetics along the way and looking for things to switch into, but rarely earned things that caught my eye that much. I also just went with the blue lightsaber the whole game until like the last 10% when I got the ability to change colors, because while I also had green and orange, I just like the blue one more than the green. And as a human, I identify as someone who just pretends everything outside of the core 6 Lucasfilms don't matter. So green, blue, purple, or red, those are the colors I'll use. I'm vanilla though. I literally just used a single blade lightsaber for like most of the game as well, because I thought the single blade was better overall than the double blade, until like the last 2 bosses where all of a sudden the double blade felt super overpowered. I don't know if I just got good with the double blade or what, but anyways. You can rarely also get stim upgrades, which are actually super clutch since it permanently gives you more health boosts, and these stims can also recover force when you upgrade that ability. It's pretty sweet, and honestly, the force regeneration is super OP, especially when it comes to boss fights, so I definitely recommend getting that, even though I do think it costs 3 skill upgrades. The game definitely had its fair share of glitchy moments, but nothing major. I'd occasionally just have things happen that were clearly not intended. Also, enemies are designed to be in certain areas and can't break bounds, so if you stay in certain places just out of their reach, they may pursue you out there and not be able to get further than an invisible wall. You can then just easily kill them because they can no longer detect you, so they'll start turning around and just casually walking away, and then you can just slash them on the back twice, roll back into safety, and they'll just look at you, start walking away again. That was pretty cheesy, and I found you could do that in a few locations, which is why it seemed a little bit ridiculous to me. Like, you would think an open area that the stormtroopers could actually travel to, and you can actually fight the stormtroopers in, wouldn't have just invisible invincibility walls, and I'm not really sure why those are there for the NPCs. I assume it was unintentional, probably just how they program the AI works that way, but it was just really strange. Overall, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is pretty fun. There isn't much more to say. The combat is addictive, the traversal is fun, and the world is an utter beauty to look at. There isn't much story here beyond navigate through the level to reach a 30-second hologram to tell you the next place to go, but the scenario works, and this is a gameplay-driven game over a story-driven game. I found it to be a thoroughly enjoyable experience, and even if I was fucking raging at some of these bosses, crying that they were unfair, they really weren't that unfair. I was just ass hurt.
See, but here's where it's fucked. Because now, it feels like I'm close, but really you're fucked. I hate this fucking level.
If you don't have severe gamer rage, then we can't be friends anyways. I like Cal enough, and even though I don't love the idea that Star Wars has added like 20 original trilogy-era Jedi that survived Order 66, whatever. I can only count the original 6 as hard canon in my opinion because there was so much dumb shit in Legends that I just smile and nod. But the same thing goes for Disney Star Wars as well. There's a lot of dumb shit in Disney Star Wars too, and I just pretend none of it actually happens. My own universe, that's 1 through 6 for me. But I still like being in the Star Wars universe, so coming back and playing this game, where I get to run around the Star Wars universe and LARP as a Jedi, that's for me. For me, this fits right in with some of the extended Star Wars universe's classic games, like The Force Unleashed, which this game is admittedly far better than, the Jedi Knights games, and the Knights of the Old Republic games. EA isn't always known for making non-penny-pinching experiences recently, so it's nice to get a solid single-player experience that's a satisfying length with really solid gameplay that isn't trying to constantly sell me shit. It's just pay the $60, pop the game in, play it for 15 hours, and then you're done. It's not bad. Before I played this game, I also bought Jedi Survivor, so I'll definitely be playing that as well at some point in the channel for the future. I heard about a lot of things like new stances and customization options, so I definitely look forward to giving it a try coming up here soon. The next game I'll be playing is Call of Duty Classic for Xbox 360, so that's been interesting so far, changing it up a bit. Anyways, I'm also doing my DCEU videos still as well as working on some other projects. Aiden's working on Pokemon stuff and Lego stuff, and we should have new Mario and Sonic retrospectives coming up soon, so that'll be cool. Also, I'm adding this to my Star Wars retrospectives playlist in timeline order. I don't have any Legends material in there yet except the holiday special, but any Legends stuff will be at the back of the playlist and any canon stuff will be in timeline order at the start. It's going to make sense to me. It's going to be really stupid. But I don't give a shit. You know what? Whenever I talk about Star Wars, we'll do it. We'll do that. You know what? Because I get really weird about my playlists. It's like my special little thing. So anyways, I'll see you guys next time. This game was pretty fun, and we'll see you next time for the Suicide Squad video. Not the Suicide Squad, just Suicide Squad. David Ayer's Suicide Squad. Cut by a fucking trailer company.